Well, good evening, everybody, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you so much for being with us today. Welcome to our Tuesday night live. That actually sounds good, doesn't it?
I love it. It
But
might just become a thing.
I think NBC will have something to say about Saturday Night Live, so let's not. But how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am good. Can't complain. God has been good. Even when we go through these detours in life, I know John Maxwell recently talked about the detour tour, and we are in that situation where sometimes they're saying we're moving from phase one to phase two, and then let's tarry on phase two, and then maybe we might move back to phase one. So when you don't know what the future holds, you know who holds the future, and
Absolutely.
that's the God we serve. Anyway, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. Now, we have been going through some classes on communication. So, and anyone who would like to know more about that, please let us know. And also let us know where you're joining in from. But today we thought about coming on and talking just a little bit to give you a snippet of some of the things that we have been learning, even as we facilitate, because we are always work in progress. So we are learning even as we try to add value to others. We find that we get so much value added to us in the process. So let's start with inviting Miss Essie to give a little background of what we have been doing, and then we'll talk a little bit and give you a snippet of what we have for you today as far as some of the lessons that we are getting from these communication classes. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. And thanks everyone for tuning in today. We're so glad that you're here. If you're watching this as a recording, we're so glad you're here. And today we are going to focus on communication. And there's a wonderful book that John Maxwell has written called Everyone Communicates and Few Connect. So we will be getting some of our teachings from that book, but we've also had the honor and the privilege of participating in a few other programs that teach on communication, not to mention the best of the best, the Maxwell method of speaking. And so we will be touching on some of this. Again, this is not even a quarter of what is in store for you if you are to join our program. And so we are here to just give you 4 points. Are they 4? They're actually 3. I was going to give a bonus point. We're here to share 3 points that are going to help us become better communicators and effective ones for that matter. They say if you are a better communicator, or rather if you're a great and an effective communicator, people tend to think you're good at everything. And so when it comes to communication, it's one of those things that we must work on every day and aim at getting better at it every single day. There's a quote that I love by Warren Buffett. He said, if you're not a good communicator, or if you're not constantly getting good at communicating, it's like winking at a girl in the dark. What happens, Daniel? Right in the darkness, nothing happens. When you wink at a girl, men, this is for you. When you wink at a girl in the darkness, nothing happens. They do not see the wink, and they might see the smile, depending on how dark it is. But the point is, you definitely want to become a good communicator, an effective communicator, both in the spoken word and in writing. And above all, this will happen when you learn how to connect with people. So let me not keep on getting you excited and I'm not getting right into it, because that's one of the points that we'll be talking about. But what we're going to do, we're going to break this into 2 parts. Today will actually might be three parts, because we were going to do 5 today and then 5 next week. But actually what we're going to do today will only cover 3, and then the following week we'll cover maybe 4. And then the following week, if we get to that other week there, if we don't cover everything next week, then we'll cover the remaining of them. And once again, this is not on any particular book or any material. It's from all over the place. And some of it will actually come from our personal stories, mistakes that we've learned, that we've made and learned from them. And the best teacher is none other but failure. We learn more when we fail than when we don't, or than when we try to play it safe. So before I get into one of the points here prematurely, let me welcome Daniel to take us through the first point.
So thank you, Essie, for that. The first point is the most important, actually. Know your audience. Because if you don't know your audience, then you will be shooting in the dark. There's an example Essie likes using a lot about fishing and what fish likes. So don't assume because that's what you like, that's what your audience likes. I will send a big shout out to one of the people who was very instrumental in growing my Christian faith when I was in high school. And his name is Pastor Ambrose, and he's still the senior pastor of Parklands Baptist Church in Nairobi. And actually, I did see a message recently that was forwarded talking about the church's response to COVID-19, and he articulated it very well. So when I look at that letter that he wrote to the congregation talking about, this is where we are, this is what the government has said, this is what our church capacity is, but because of all this is the route we are taking. And that was signed by Pastor Ambrose. And I remembered him coming to pray for us before we did our national exams and talking about the story of David and Goliath. And I have never forgotten that story because of the way he framed it. First of all, he knew he's talking to young men, so he spoke in Sheng. And then he used examples that were so easy to follow. And up to now, I always, anytime I remember Pastor Ambrose and Pastor Ambrose, wherever you are, God bless you. You made an impact in my life because you knew your audience and you tailored your messages to that audience. The way he spoke to us when he's talking to us as young men was completely different from when I listened to him on Family FM, and completely different from the letter that I saw when it's addressed to his congregation. So know their demographics. How old are they? What is if you're talking to a bigger audience, what are the cultures represented there? Is there something that can be unifying? What do you want them to know? What do you want them to take away from this? All that can only happen if you know your audience. Are there any sacred cows? Are there any hot button topics to avoid? Or if we are going to talk on a touchy subject, and touchy subjects are not lacking in this day and age and in this culture, especially at this time, how do we bring it forward to a point where everybody can be together, that we can find that middle ground? All that can only happen if you know your audience. So how do you know your audience? And that is where I'll bring my lovely wife to talk about, if you're talking to a congregation or you're talking to a big audience, how do you start it? How do you get to know where they're going, as opposed to when you're talking one-on-one? How do I get to know my audience? Let me give a quick example that just came to my mind. I've been in the training sphere for a while, and I remember the first time I had to do a PowerPoint presentation. And I stood up in front of my peers. There were about 40 peers, and I didn't know how to introduce it. And the first thing, because the only time I had ever spoken in public was in church setting. So I was about to start with, praise God. and and I had to catch myself immediately and look at the time. I'm like, what time is it? And I'm like, well, good afternoon, everybody. So it was off to a rough start. I thank God that I was able to catch on. Maybe it's because God saw that I was trying to bring glory to his name. But anyway, before I digress, that was just an example of knowing your audience. Who are you talking to? Because you might say praise God and it's met with blank stares. So, Essie,
Yes.
if we're talking, if you have been given an opportunity to speak to a group, how do you get to know the audience you're talking to?
Thank you, Daniel. And I love that story that you've just shared on how to make sure that you're saying what needs to be said at the right time. Yeah. So anyway, number one, you want to make sure that you have, if you're going to speak to a meeting or maybe to a church, you want to spend time with a decision maker and have what we call a meeting before the meeting. And this small meeting before the big meeting, it will be you getting to know your audience. And you can ask all manner of questions to find out who your audience are. Daniel did touch on this actually when he mentioned get to know about the demographics. Get to know what are the age mates, or rather, what are the age groups in this group. Can you imagine going to speak to a meeting and here you are talking about baby boomers and everyone there is a millennial? You will, whatever you're talking about will just be going right above their heads. So get to know your audience, and you would know your audience by having that meeting with the decision maker. If it's a one-on-one conversation, do your research. Get to know this person. What is it that they like? Well, a story is told about a man who was going to meet with Warren Buffett. And he knew that Warren Buffett likes Pepsi. I believe it's Pepsi. And what that person did, they only had a very short time. You get very little time, if at all you get it, with Warren Buffett. And so they took a Pepsi with them. And when they presented it to Warren Buffett was so excited, and he said, you know what, you took the time to get to know what it is that I like. You can have all the time with me. Why? Because they took the time to get to know this person. So at this time and age, we have social media. Social media is available. Don't just go meeting with someone without getting to visit their Facebook page. Maybe you can avoid their LinkedIn because they'll find out you are checking them out. But get to know what it is that they like, lest you go talking about their university kids, and probably their kids are not even in university, they are preschoolers, and right at that moment you disconnect or you lose them, and they lose you. So visit their social media pages. Maybe if you have a friend that knows this person, ask questions about this person. What is it about this person? Maybe I can ask Daniel, Daniel, that friend of yours that I'm going to have coffee with, what is it that you can tell me about them? And then that can be a pickup line, or that can be a good way to start a conversation with the person that you're going to meet with. The other way that you can do that is to ask curious questions. Then you can start by small talk. Small talk is not easy, but it's always good when you wake up in the morning, get to know what's happening around you, get to know what's going on around the world. And then from there, ask a curious question and the conversation will take care of itself. Just follow the trail. If it takes a turn to the left, go with it. And before you know it, you'll have gotten to know this person well. So know your audience, and you will do that by doing more listening than talking. If you do all the talking, then you might go home empty-handed. having not gotten much of what you were looking for. I would like to probably share a story about something interesting that happened. And let me see if I can, oh, it's disappearing. It keeps on coming and disappearing. I had it down, but I didn't complete the statement. There, right there is part of communicating. You want to make sure that you write down your pointers. I thought I would remember the story, but actually escaped my mind. But anyway, I will get back to it. Daniel, let's carry on to the next point, and then I'll come back with the...
Okay, thank you, Essie. So, know your audience was number one. And after you know your audience, you talk to them, not over them. Be relatable. Relate to them. Meet them at their level. Are you this greatly educated person with all these accolades? That's well and good. But if you're going to talk to kindergartners, they don't care what accolades you have. All they care is probably that you are so-and-so's grandpa or so-and-so's dad. And that is enough. Talk to them, not over them. Try to eliminate any physical barriers. I can't help but think about some of the teachers we had, and there was this skits that, I don't know if those guys still make those skits anymore on YouTube, but there's a guy by the name Professor Pap. You remember him, Essie? Who the students will start talking about, now you will introduce me, and they say you are Professor Parmenas Agrippinus Paponditi, or PAP in short, EGH, CBS, KBC, PhD, and now pursuing a doctorate or two. And you will ask, and you are, they say, an ignorant bunch of Form 2s yet to achieve what Professor Pap had achieved by class 6.
Ouch.
So
Ouch.
from there, what are you going to tell them? Because you've already said, I am here, you are here. Now let's talk. We're not going to have any conversation. Is your goal to impact or to impress? If your goal is to impress, you will not impact. If your goal is to impact, you will impact and probably impress them as well. Because, as Maya Angelou said, people will forget what you said. Yeah. People will forget what you did. People will never forget how you made them feel.
Absolutely.
Did they feel welcome? Did they feel like this person cares about us? Did they feel like he feels he is real with us? Or did they feel like, well, whatever you're on a different level? And thank you for the invitation, and let's get going. No. Impact, not impress. Number 2, be vulnerable. If I was to ask you, what's the greatest lesson you've learned in life? It's probably not going to be a lesson that you learned when you are at the mountaintop. It is a lesson on failure, because failures make you. My friend and brother Alan Masega likes a quote that says that for you to discover new oceans, you have to be willing to lose sight of the shore. Or that, rather, to discover new lands, I believe. Alan, if you're listening, whenever you get a chance, please correct me whether it's new lands or new oceans. But in other words, if you're willing, unless you're willing to lose sight of the shore, you will not discover anything new. And when you lose sight of the shore, there will be storms. There may be a hurricane or two, but that's when you learn. Now, when you learn that, if you come back, talk to people about the failures in life, because that is not where you are right now. They will not think less of you. If anything, they will think highly of you. It's funny we are talking about this because today I was my Bible reading was in the book of 2 Samuel, where David danced with all his might, and his clothes fell off. And Michal, his wife, Saul's daughter, said, "Today the king of Israel made a show before the servant girls." And you know what he said? "Those servant girls held me in high regard because I was worshiping God." So what was perceived by someone else as a failure was actually more impactful to more people. Your failures show your personal side. They show your human side. And they are more relatable than your successes. Does that mean you don't talk about your successes? Absolutely not. But they should not be what is taking the bulk. Even your successes can be framed as, if it wasn't for this failure, I wouldn't get to where I am. And because I am here now, despite your mess ups in life, you can get here as well. Essie, something to add? Oh.
Actually, I did remember my story, and story. Thank you. I had started writing it down and then I got distracted. So what happened is, this one time I walked into, again, it's on sacred cows and hot button topics to avoid. I walked into an Indian restaurant and I asked for beef curry. And exactly what's going on right now is what happened at that time. Everybody went quiet and they had that stare and gaze on their face. Like, what did she say? And then very quickly, the silence made me uncomfortable and I realized, oh, I meant goat curry. So when you do your research well and you get to know your audience, then you know what to avoid. The hot topics, or rather the hot button topics to avoid. And then Daniel talked about being vulnerable, sharing your failures. You will impress people more with your failure stories than your success stories. When you talk about how successful you are and you don't share that once upon a time you made a few mistakes to get to where you are, to master that skill, then you could come across as someone who is unreachable, who is way up there. And there's a story that most of us know. Growing up, we are told about this little rabbit or hare that could not reach those beautiful, beautiful, delicious, juicy fruits on that big tree. And after making several attempts, they said, you know what? They were not even delicious. Why? Because they couldn't reach them. One to us as speakers, if all we do is share of our successes and not talk about our failures, because we could come across as perfect people. And we all know that no one is perfect. In fact, when we make mistakes, we learn. Most of the biggest lessons that have ever been learned in life came as a result of either accidents or mistakes that were made.
Thank you, Essie. So basically, that beef curry was a sacred cow, literally. So.
Yes. I made a big mess right there. Yeah.
But anyway, again, be vulnerable. If you don't know something, it's okay. Say, I don't know. But then do something about it. Find out and get back. And we have seen those stories where, and you can tell when someone is trying to cook up something because they will keep rambling and rambling and rambling and rambling and moving on and on and on. And then when you get back, you're like, what did you say? Which brings us to our next point. Segue, less is more. Simplicity is elegant. When I think of this, I can't help but remember Professor Alvin Tinsley teaching us C++, and he said, the first thing I will tell you today is KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And from that moment, I've always known what KISS means. Anyway, less is more. Sometimes we bombard people with information, or I will come up with a 16-point message on how to overcome failure. And by the time I get to point number 9, half of the audience is asleep. And then I tell them, hey, wake up, let's stretch. Okay, now let's go to point number 10. We still have 6 more to go.
Ouch.
So by that time, you've lost everybody. And you might have something very, very, very helpful. But know your audience, talk to them, not over them, and then keep it simple. Keeping it simple doesn't mean you're uncultured. It doesn't mean you cannot drop those big words. No. It just means you can relate to people. Less content with more practical applications. Belabor the point. Keep repeating it until everybody gets it. So that, we talked about Pastor Ambrose. When he was praying for us before we did our KCSE, he talked about the story of David and Goliath. And the one thing I took out of that was when David was looking at that giant, he was just praying and saying, God, this guy is too big to miss. And from there, I knew that this exam is too big to miss. I will hit something. Or a time when he talked about he who can do exceedingly, abundantly, above all. And the way he put it was exactly that way. Up to this day, many years later, don't ask how many, because that will tell my age, but I still remember that God can do exceedingly, abundantly, above all that I can ask or imagine. Again, thank you, Pastor Ambrose. Less content, more practical applications. And then the second point, and this is where I'll bring Essie in, is the use of personal stories. How can we use our story? How can you use your story to reach to other people? Take us away.
Use of personal stories.
Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful point. Well, when we share our personal stories, people tend to relate with us more than when we tell them about all these wonderful big stories that we read in a book or we saw in a movie. And these 2 points, the previous one, less is more, and use of practical applications, combining it with the use of personal stories, are interrelated. So allow me to go back there for a minute. Less content. Maybe focus on maybe picking like 3 points or 5 points and cut through the clutter. Don't give too much backstory. Don't give too much information. Try to simplify it. Make it simple, and then have more practical applications. Help your audience know how they can get to the destination quicker. Help them cut through the clutter by providing them with exactly what they need, the tools that they need to arrive to their destination. And as you do that, you could use your personal stories. When you share about something that happened to you, like how I just shared how I unintentionally found myself in a situation saying something that I shouldn't say, in a setting that that should have been the last place where I would actually even make such a mistake. I mean, when you share such stories, people will remember you more, and they'll remember what the content was, rather than when we just give them lots and lots of content and lots of information. Remember, at this time and age, content information is out there and it's available for free. If you go to Google, you can find any kind of information. I read something yesterday that caught my attention, and don't quote me on this. 40,000, there are 40,000 searches at any given second taking place in Google.
Wow.
Meaning, information on Google is available and it's free. In fact, Daniel likes to say Google is your friend. When I ask him to do something, or I'm trying to get to know, what's this, what's that, he'll tell me, Google is your friend. Go do your research. Other times he's kind and he's nice, and he would just bring it down into, broken down into bite-sized pieces for me to get. But other times he would just send me to Google. Google is there, lots of information. YouTube is there, lots of information. Pinterest is there, all these great platforms, and so many other people that have put courses together, and they have this information out there for free. So information is out there for free, and it's available for free. But when people bring you in to speak, they bring you to speak mostly to hear about your personal stories. How did you get there? Did you fail? And when you fail, how long were you on the ground? And how did you pick yourself up? And what did you do? What was the experience like? People look for those examples. They look for stories on how they can relate with you. So that right there, less is more and simplicity is elegant. Keep it simple. Keep it elegant. Over to you, Daniel.
Thank you, Essie. So keep it simple. Remember, people will relate to your stories. So use those personal stories. And people, as Essie you said, all this information is out there. So people don't come to you because they don't have anywhere else to go. They come to you because they want to relate with you. Are you relatable? I see Nalisha. Hello, how are you? Thank you for being with us today. Anybody else out there, please let us know where you are and what you're saying. You're saying, Nalisha, we look up to you. You're one of the people that, talk about accomplishments.
Oh, yes.
But then when you listen to her, you wouldn't even know until she mentions it, and you're like, so that's why you do this, and that's why you're like that. And when you talk about resources that are out there, she is a treasure. So thank you, Nalisha. God bless you. Now, when you talk about information being out there, as Essie said, Google is there, YouTube is there. We know of someone by the name Julius Yego who won an Olympic gold medal in the javelin throw after teaching himself from YouTube. But people look up to you. People want to hear you because they want to hear your story. So what's your story? Is it worth listening to? You will never know until you tell it. So be encouraged, get out there, let us hear your story. And as we hear your story, remember, know your audience, talk to them, not over them, be relatable, and keep it simple. Keep it simple. So that is just a snippet of what we have been up to if you would like to know more about it, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you so much for being here today. I will hand this over to Essie to land the plane as we are approaching our final descent. So thank you so much. God bless you. Essie, over to you.
Thanks, Daniel. And as you are sharing, I remembered a point that we actually mentioned, and I meant to say something about it. That was when you talked about don't talk to
them.
Say, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Talk to people, not over them.
Exactly. And I couldn't help but remember, or rather think of several examples that I could give of how sometimes you'll be in a meeting or you'll be somewhere and you're thinking, oh my God, protect my feelings. I know I might be down here and you're up there, but please come down to my level. Can we converse? Can we have a conversation where I can hear you and you can hear me out? So talking to people rather than talking over them. First of all, it could be as a result of you look down on that person, or it could be as a result of maybe, what could be the other one, Daniel?
Condescending, that's looking down on them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's basically the main one, or you feel like you're at a higher level than them.
Or you're sharing something, they have no idea what you're talking about. And again, it ties to that first point there, knowing your audience. Yeah. Wonderful, lovely. And I see my friend Ruma, all the way from Mauritius. I guess it's morning. It's morning for Ruma. Good morning, Ruma. Good to see you, my friend. Well, that brings us to the end of our session today. We would love to see you back here again next week, same time, and we will cover another 3 points on lessons we are learning, or rather lessons from our communication. We are also learning lessons we are learning and teaching in our communication classes. We have several. We have some for adults, and we also have some for teenagers, especially during this time when the kids are home. Though some of them will be going back to school. We are also working with a group that's in Kenya. And you know, in Kenya, there's no school for the rest of the year until 2021. And so we are learning so much from them, as well as having the honor and the privilege of teach them a few things on how they can become effective communicators. And I do see a comment here from Tabitha Mushai Kahora, a good friend of mine, all the way from Boston, actually Worcester, Massachusetts. And she says she's very grateful. Thanks for sharing with us and keep up the good work. Thank you for staying the whole time, Tabitha. We appreciate you, and keep doing the wonderful job you're doing with your husband, preaching the gospel and impacting the lives of people, including the young people. Well, that brings us again to the end of our talk today. See you back here again next week as we continue talking on lessons on how to effectively connect and communicate with other people. For now, it's goodbye. Have a good night and have a good day.
Thanks, guys.